criminal defense attorney Brian Gaither and criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Holly Waltman. Thank you guys for being here.
Good morning.
All right, so Holly, I want to get your thoughts on how impactful you think it was for the defense to call their first witness, and that being the defendant's father.
I thought it was a great move. I did, however, think that after we heard from Skylar's father, we would be presented with more witnesses that know her personally. I thought it was an interesting move to start with Dad. I thought it was a good move. It humanized her for sure. But then to switch to professional witnesses and experts, I thought that was interesting because presumably that then puts us in about 3/4 of the way through the trial. It's kind of when juries start to get a little tired. It's when they start not paying attention. And so I wonder and I hope that the opinions of the experts weren't lost because of the positioning of them in the witness list.
Well, I think it definitely got them alert, at least for the start of the witnesses, but I do agree. But they did end the day with a coworker. We'll get into that.
That was weird.
That was a little off, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But okay, so tell me, Brian, what do you think about the dad being able to really humanize his daughter? And not only that, the defense was able to get pictures through the father. So how do you think that they did starting out of the gate?
That was excellent. Pictures worth 1,000 words, and that's once they introduced that to the jury, is now you're putting a baby human sympathetic picture in the jury's mind. So sometimes it can kind of, I don't like saying muddy the waters, but sometimes you can play on the emotions, and I think that was an excellent move.
No, for sure. I mean, I was awing at some of these photos, and I was thinking, okay, if I'm awing, they're definitely awing, and they're looking at this stuff for the first time, and we've seen this stuff time and time again. Now, these pictures we haven't seen, but, you know, they're not as, delved into the details like we are here. So if I'm moved, I'm sure that some of them were as well, and that's exactly what the defense wanted to do. Let's take a listen to the state now objecting outside of the jury's presence about the photos being presented.
Mr. Knippen, you wanted to make a better record concerning the photographs of the defendant?
Yes, Your Honor. The state objected to all of the photographs where Skylar was either a baby or a small child, or all the way up until the relevant time period for which we're here to discuss. The state believes that those photographs were shown to the jury simply to gather or garner sympathy for Skylar, and I didn't feel that they were relevant to the proceedings and the issue of what we're here for today.
Court gave a cautionary instruction to the jury as they were viewing this, so the objection is going to be overruled.
Okay, so, these instructions, Holly, to the jury, like, hey, disregard, the whole unringing the bell kind of thing. I don't know how effective it really is for them to understand, to divide their brains that, yes, I feel sympathy, but I'm supposed to put that aside. I'm not even supposed to factor that into my decision making. Do you think that the judge made the right ruling, and how effective do you think that admonishment to the jury is?
So one thing that was shocking when I became an attorney and started seeing and interacting with judges is the broad discretion that they all have. Was it a proper ruling? Sure. I think it was within the judge's discretion to do that. And of course, the legal remedy is to instruct the jury on the way to do this. The interesting thing that the defense probably was attempting to do and successfully did here was backdoor these photos in for a different purpose. And will it garner sympathy? Absolutely. There's 7 women on this jury. Presumably, some of them are mothers of children about this age. So, yes, it was a great move for the defense. The state, that clip we just saw was basically the recap of the state yesterday. No, I don't like this. No, I'm objecting to this, and I don't like how this is going. But it's a little too late. You had your case in chief, and you guys rested. So
well, I mean,
they're
establishing a record. I would have objected for sure.
Sure.
So he was doing his job, but yeah, we're definitely going to have more on Dad on the stand with you guys. You're going to be with me through the hour, but we've got to go to commercial. We have more of Scott Richardson's testimony, like I said, after the break. So don't go away. This is CourtTV Live.
Did you tell her anything on the way to the police station?
Oh, I assumed, based on what I was told, that they were going to ask her about something she may have witnessed. So I told her to tell the truth, to make sure she didn't make anything up, and to cooperate.
Did you teach Jackson and Skylar to respect the police and authority?
I mean, we always thought that that's what we should do.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. Those were the words from the defendant's father, Scott Richardson, describing the day he drove his daughter to the police station for her first interview with law enforcement on July 14, 2017. It was at the police station that day that Scott Richardson would find out that his daughter was pregnant and delivered the baby at home. Let's look back at some of what he said.
Do you remember that day waiting outside the interrogation room with your wife?
Yes, I do.
The interrogation tapes have been cut down a little bit. How long were you waiting, to the best of your recollection, outside that room?
It seemed like forever, but I think it was at least 2 hours.
Okay. Before you went in?
Correct.
When you ultimately went inside the room, and you watched it in here, and you'd seen it before that, right?
Yes.
By the way, did you know that you were being continued to be recorded when you went back in that room?
I did not.
Did Kim or Skylar?
No, we were not told.
How surprised were you when you found out that your daughter had been pregnant?
Very.
That she delivered a baby and buried her in the backyard?
We were in shock.
You said some things in the interrogation. You said, why did you lie to us? Why did you lie to us? Can you tell us what you meant by that?
Well, we didn't know she was pregnant, and we had struggled with the whole eating disorder since she was 12, 13 years old, where she wasn't telling us what was going on.
Do you know why she didn't feel comfortable enough coming to you and saying she was pregnant?
I wish I did.
At the time when you were questioning Skylar, did you know that the doctor had told her that she had 10 weeks before she would deliver?
I didn't know that.
What would you and Kim have done if Skylar had delivered a live baby and come downstairs with a live baby?
We would have taken it into the family.
Would you have been mad?
I think we would have been in shock, and we probably would have been angry, but
If she had told you that she was pregnant immediately on April 26th, as soon as she found out, how do you think Kim and you would have reacted?
angry then shocked.
After that interrogation, so after you find out the information that we all saw in here, what are you thinking at that point?
We didn't know what to think, but we believed her. We didn't expect anything to come of it, and matter of fact, we were told that there wouldn't have been really anything. I think he said no significant charges is what he said.
6 days later, so, well, actually, in between that time, so July 14th was the first interrogation, correct?
Correct.
And the 20th was the second.
Yes.
Did you have Lieutenant Fain's cell phone?
He gave me a card at that first interview with his cell phone on it.
And at some point in between those two dates, did you and Skylar and your family start making arrangements to try to do a more formal burial and memorial service for Annabelle?
We did.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as, has not been marked. I'm going to mark it as Defendant's Exhibit JJJ. J, 4 J's. While they're looking at that exhibit, do you have any other exhibits? Not right now. What information did you relay to Lieutenant Fain about Skylar's desire to have Annabelle back and have a proper memorial and burial?
Well, I believe we'd been told that we could expect to get the remains back, so I asked him if that was still the case and when we might be able to do that so we could make arrangements.
Okay. Did you ultimately get them back?
No.
Can we approach on this?
My legal panel is still with me, criminal defense attorney Brian Gaither and criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Holly Waltman. All right, Brian, tell me, what were your thoughts on Dad, one, testifying that he did not know that his conversation with his family in that interrogation room was being recorded, one, and two, the judge allowing that portion of the video to be played for the jurors, even over the objections of the defense? Was that the right call to make?
Well, unfortunately, the Supreme Court has already said that cops can basically lie to get their investigation. That's on the books.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, because this is coming out, and because how the interrogation happened, and even the father saying he didn't know, if something happens with this case, it may be a very interesting issue for appeal, because that's how laws are changed and interpreted. So unfortunately, the judge made the right call, because technically, an officer, they don't have to be completely forthcoming. However, like I said, it's a very interesting issue, because you're seeing the dad is saying he did not know what he was recording.
Yeah.
And that could change things going forward in the future.
And the only reason why, Holly, I'm still questioning the judge's call on that is because they had an interview with Skylar, law enforcement, in the beginning, and then they had a recorder there for her to see. So they told her it was going to be recorded. She saw this equipment there, and then when they were done, they took the equipment out of the room. So at that point, does she have a reasonable expectation that she was now going to have privacy, especially when the officer says, now we're going to give you time with your family? And of course, parents didn't know there was a recording device in there in the beginning, so they don't see any of that. It obviously came in. Is this something that they could bring up on appeal, like Brian said? Do you think that the judge made that right call?
I think that the judge made, again, a call that's within his discretion.
Yeah.
Is it the right call? I don't know. What is interesting here is everyone knows and everyone hears the police can lie to you. The police can record you. They don't have to have your consent. What I think he is shocked about, and what Dad was really getting at, is I didn't know the consequences could be this grave.
Yeah.
I think it's a very slick trick to take a recorder out of a room. You know this child, she's an adult,
Yeah.
But barely. And at 18, does she have the mental capacity to comprehend, if I take something out of a room, then it's no longer there? Probably not.
Right.
It was a slick move, but the police, this is going to really hinge on the outcome, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you saw that Dad in that interrogation room was basically doing the prosecutor's job of cross-examining his daughter without her taking the stand. So I'm sure when he was sitting in the courtroom watching the state's case in chief, he had to think back like, wow, if I could do this all over again. Let's listen to a clip of him on the stand talking about what his biggest regret is.
Hasn't Kim been in the courtroom since the start of the trial?
She was subpoenaed by the prosecution, and therefore she's not allowed to be in the courtroom. But she's been here every day.
Were you aware that she was cheering Skylar on to lose weight?
I was not.
Were you aware that she was doing it when Skylar was a sophomore and Skylar sent her selfies in the mirror when she was a sophomore in high school?
I was not.
What's the biggest regret in your life, Scott?
Not having an attorney for the second interrogation.
What, if you could tell the jury one thing about Skylar before you get off the stand, what would it be?
She would never hurt another living being, let alone a baby.
Brian, so the biggest regret Dad has in life is not having an attorney, obviously because it's impacted his family, his daughter. Do you think that if he did get an attorney for his daughter during those interrogation interviews, that they would even be here today?
I think it would be a whole different outcome.
Yeah.
Because with the attorney, if the attorney advises you to go and speak with officers, you're pretty much prepped, and the attorney's going to be present.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you don't have to speak to the officers.
Yeah.
You don't have to go. You're basically, when you go speak to the officers, you're basically doing their job, and you're actually assisting them with their investigation. It's the prosecution's job. When I was a prosecutor, it's my job to prove everything. I have to go through the whole process.
Yeah.
So if they had an attorney, like when I have clients now, the advice I give is you don't have to speak with them. And
Right.
if it's a situation, because every situation is different, that you need to, I'm gonna be right there with you. So
Yeah.
we may not even be here if she had an attorney.
I guess we'd never know, but I mean, I think the state, given the fact that we've seen all of their evidence in their case, that they were really hanging their hats on her own statements in that interrogation video, that second one for sure. All right, guys, this trial has captivated the nation, and now you can take a deeper dive into this case with our new Court TV podcast. Vinnie Politan and Seema Iyer take a closer look at the challenges the prosecution faces in Ohio versus Richardson.
So the headlines are cheerleader, has baby, murders baby, burns the baby, and buries the remains in her backyard. Public enemy number one, evil.
Yeah.
One problem happened on the way to the trial for the prosecution is that expert recanted her opinion about whether or not those bones were actually burned.
You can listen to the entire episode today. It's available on Stitcher, Apple, and Google Podcasts. Or you can always find it on CourtTV.com today and every week. We'll be right back after this quick break, so stay with us.
CourtTV is everywhere.
This is CourtTV, your front row seat to justice.
With live gavel-to-gavel trial coverage.
We'll bring you the most compelling trials across our nation.
I am a homicidal maniac.
On the air, online, in your pocket.
You'll see and hear all the evidence.
Can you take the hose and squeeze it?
And streaming free on Roku, Fire TV, and Apple TV.
The verdict is in.
CourtTV, your front row seat to justice.
Based on your education, experience, and background, do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to whether Skylar Richardson gave birth to a stillborn on May 7th?
Yes.
And what is that opinion?
That indeed, early in the morning on May 7th, at home in her bathroom alone, she delivered a stillbirth infant in the bathroom, in the toilet, at approximately 3 a.m.
You're watching Court TV. I'm Yori Tewalde. That was Dr. John White, an expert called by the defense yesterday, stating that in his opinion, Skylar Richardson delivered a stillborn baby. During his testimony, Dr. White stated the pieces of evidence he reviewed in order to come to his conclusion of a stillbirth. He looked at Richardson's records from Hilltop and the police interrogation footage. Those records were also reviewed by the state's pathologist, Dr. Susan Brown, who, when called by the state, said baby Richardson's cause of death was homicidal violence. However, unlike Dr. Brown, Dr. White said he also took account of Skylar's medical history prior to the pregnancy. Here's what he had to say about how he came to his conclusion.
As a result of your review of these records, can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what facts support your opinion? Your opinion that Annabelle was born stillborn.
Okay. Well, you don't care if I go on a while.
You just answer however you have to answer.
Okay. So initially we know going into the pregnancy that Skylar has a long history of an eating disorder. Her weight had bounced around quite a bit. In February of 2015, there was a little crisis with her eating disorder. She had lost weight. Her friends were worried. They contacted her mother, and her mother took her in to see a specialist at Children's Hospital. At that visit, she weighed 103 pounds and was 5'2", and they ordered her labs, and just because of the vigor of youth, her labs were pretty much normal. But the doctor worked with her, and as they do, and it's my psychiatric rotation at the University of Kentucky was in the inpatient eating disorders unit, and so I can speak to how challenging these problems are with the patients and their families and the doctors, because this can be a fatal disease. And people, I think everybody's heard of Karen Carpenter. She died of anorexia. It's a very serious medical problem. But anyway, that being said, she did well. That was spring of her sophomore year. She did gain weight. She went through junior year. I didn't see much to really talk about during that period of time. And she was ready to start her senior year at Carlisle High School, took a sports physical. And at that physical, she weighed 134 pounds. She had a normal blood pressure. Her physical exam was good. Her weight was back into a normal range, and that exam took place on September 13th. And that's important because it's easy to say that was her pre-pregnancy weight. And some of this is out of order the way I found it, because I'm giving you a chronological order of her pregnancy and not necessarily how I found out the information. But what we do know, due to the interview with Trey Johnson by the detectives and by the DNA results, that 99% 99.9% sure that Trey Johnson was the father of the baby, that sometime between July 24th of 2016 and August 7th of 2016, Skylar and Mr. Johnson were involved in some relationships, as teenagers do, and a pregnancy occurred. And so when the conception occurs at that point, when you're figuring out the date of the pregnancy, you would actually back it up 2 weeks, because the pregnancies are calculated from the first day of the last menstrual period, and then you calculate out 40 weeks. As obstetricians, we have a little trick we can do in our head real quick. It's called Nagel's rule. You subtract 3 months and add 7 days. So the latest she would have conceived is August 7th. If you subtract 2 weeks, the first date of her last menstrual period would have been July 24th. That would give her a due date of June, May, April 24th, May 1st of 2017. So I knew her due date by that information was approximately May 7th, which actually, if you look at the forensic anthropology report of the femur length and the measurements of all the bones when they gave a range of 38 to 40 weeks, the femur length, which is what I use because that's what we use clinically with our ultrasound dating, her femur length was consistent with her conception date, which we knew from Mr. Johnson, confirmed by the DNA, and we knew her pre-pregnancy weight on July 13th of 134. Well, she got busy with her school year. She dropped out of cheerleading. She never saw a doctor for her pregnancy. She was not on any, she was not on any birth control when she got pregnant, and had not yet seen an OBGYN, and was finishing up her senior year, and went in to see Dr. Andrew on April 26, 2017, for what he thought and she thought and everybody thought, but what Skylar was suspicious wasn't for, because Skylar held out some suspicion that she could be pregnant, but she went in, as often the times with his age group, to begin birth control. Dr. Andrew, like we all do, examined her, realized really quickly she was pregnant, realized really quickly she was in the 3rd trimester, and actually did a fundal height measurement at that visit and measured to be 32 centimeters, which a fundal height, just by coincidence, but a fundal height measurement is equal to the weeks of gestation plus or minus 3. So he estimated her to be 32 weeks gestation on April 26th. So it was his belief on April 26th, and it was probably conveyed to Skylar that she was about 32 weeks pregnant. It was too late for her in the state of Ohio to have an abortion. She panicked. She told her, "You can't tell my mother this." Her mother was waiting for her out in the waiting room. She left the office, and Skylar probably thought she had some time to figure out what.
The objection is sustained. Ladies and
Okay.
gentlemen, the purpose of this witness is not to provide you with factual information
Okay, I'm sorry.
with regard to what happened. The purpose of this witness is to explain to you what facts he used in reaching his conclusions, and then you are to determine whether or not those facts have been established by direct evidence. So the objection is sustained. Mr. Ritkers, please rephrase. The jury will disregard the last answer.
Well, Your Honor, I would like for him to continue what he relied upon and what were the relevant facts, as the court just pointed out. And
He can indicate the things that he relied on and cite that source material, but he is testifying as if they are facts, and they are not.
Bringing back my legal panel to discuss Brian Gaither and Holly Waltman. They're both criminal defense attorneys and former prosecutors. Brian, I had no idea you were a former prosecutor. Okay,
Yes.
So we're all former prosecutors. How about that? All right, Holly, I'm going to start with you. Okay, so Usually, I'm not really good with medical experts. It's above my pay grade. I have no idea what you're talking about. That's why I went to law school. So, but this guy was sort of clear. He told a story. He went as far back as 2015, looked at pieces of evidence and records that the state experts did not look at. And Holly, he was the only expert to say with scientific certainty that this baby was born, stillborn. And there were experts on the state side that one couldn't say whether the baby was born alive, and even had 2 pathologists on the state side who disagreed, had different conclusions, right? Terrible look. Will this raise that reasonable doubt the defense wants?
Oh, absolutely. The state had to be cringing when this was going on. And what I loved most about his testimony is that he was citing the state's experts. I wrote down, he was talking about the femur length of the baby and cited a state's expert. He is tying a bow on the defense's case. And we were talking about this on the break. If the state doesn't call some rebuttal witnesses, to come back and try and take away some of the teeth that this expert gave, they're going to be in trouble.
Brian, your thoughts?
I completely agree. As an attorney, you have to realize the way I was trained, when I get a file, I should prosecute the case and defend the case. You should see both sides.
Yeah.
From what I've seen, I don't know if the state did a good job predicting arguments. If I'm a prosecutor, I'm gonna already predict that the defense of this is stillborn.
Right.
So it seems like they took their experts and they was trying to force it's a homicide, but we don't know exactly how she died or what happened. And it was really focused on this homicide. And the most logical argument is it wasn't stillborn. And I think that's where they dropped the ball heavily, and it's going to play out if they don't bring him back up for rebuttal, because now you have an expert just saying because her weight before and what she is now, it was stillborn, and the state has no answer for that right now.
Well, the thing is, a lot of the experts are relying on the surveillance video of these interrogations or the interviews that were taking place, and a lot of its focus is on the second one. And a lot of the talk about coercion and false confessions is a really big deal, at least for both sides, or at least for the defense. How can we honestly say and convince a jury that this expert, this doctor, this OBGYN, and his findings are as accurate when he's relying on these statements she's making? How do you determine what she's saying is truth and what she's saying is a lie?
Well, I think that juries, by and large, want to get it right. They have already reconciled the fact that they are chosen for this jury.
Yeah.
They are giving their time and their energy to this, and they want to get it right. And you said it just a minute ago. I really liked this expert. He made it really comfortable.
Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, we're all humans, especially jurors. They're going to go with what feels right, what feels comfortable. And if an expert is talking to them, making eye contact with each of them, and talking to them not in a let me dumb this down for you type of way, but let me help you understand the bigger picture and bring in facts that the state didn't bring in. Bring in evidence that they did put up, and let me use it and spin it to fit my story.
Right.
That is what a jury is going to cling to. That's what they're going to hold on to.
Yeah, he definitely was credible, and that was a brilliant move for him to use their own findings to support his own findings. All right. While we wait for court to start in Ohio, I want to talk about the next big high-profile trial that we're covering on Court TV. Jury selection is underway in Texas versus Amber Gaither. It's a case of a white former Dallas police officer who killed an unarmed black man in his own home. The shooting sparked protests and outrage when it happened last September. 31-year-old Amber Gaither is charged with the murder in the shooting death of 26-year-old Botham Jean. Gaither had just finished a 15-hour shift and was still in her police uniform. Gaither claims she entered an apartment that she mistakenly thought was hers. She saw a man inside that she says she thought was an intruder. That's when she fired her own gun twice. One of the bullets hit Botham Jean in the chest as he stood up from his couch where he was watching TV in his living room. Botham Jean died later in the hospital. Gaither could face life in prison if she is found guilty of the murder. Trial set to start September 23rd, and you know Court TV will have gavel-to-gavel coverage of Texas versus Amber Gaither. We've got to go to a short break. Stay with us, but this is Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice.
Fine, tell us what's going on. He says you have to tell us you're 18. You can't tell us.
I tried to clean up the baby just a little.
You tried to cremate the baby?
Yeah, that's what I did it.
So you delivered a live baby, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but I wasn't really sure. I didn't think she was going to get a heartbeat.
We still love you, but this is a horrible mess.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. That was Skylar Richardson during her second interview with police on July 20th, 2017, telling her parents that she cremated the remains of her baby girl. However, before that moment, Richardson denied several times that she never burned the baby, and evidence that the baby was burned at all has since been disproven. So, why did Skylar admit to it? The defense claims Richardson was coerced into making this statement along with others that led to the charges she is now facing. Yesterday, the defense called Alan Hirsch, an expert in false confessions, to testify. Here's some of what he said.
Can you summarize for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what the Reed method is all about?
So technically there are 9 steps, but it really consists of 2 essential steps. First, the interrogator expresses absolute certainty of the suspect's guilt. They communicate to them, we know you're guilty, nothing you say will convince us otherwise, and they cut off any denials or protestations of innocence. Having scared the suspect like that, they then do various things which we call minimizing the crime. These are various ways of suggesting or even explicitly telling the defendant that if you confess, it won't be that bad. It may be that your role was secondary, or there were mitigating circumstances, or there are a great number of minimization techniques or themes. And it's that combination that breaks down people, innocent people included. Confrontation scares the defendant into thinking it's futile to maintain innocence, and minimization makes the defendant or suspect conclude that confessing won't be that bad. And if you reach those 2 conclusions taken together just as a basic cost-benefit analysis, you'll conclude that confessing might be your best way out.
Skylar, and I believe I'm referring to the second interrogation, July 20th. Was there anything in particular about that interrogation that bothered you? And I'm referring to gurgle, the word gurgle.
Yes.
And what's troubling about that?
It's a subset of a broader phenomenon where there were several examples where Skylar seemed to echo language or information that had been given to her by the interrogators, and that's perhaps the most obvious example. Lieutenant Fain suggested to her more than once, the baby gurgled, did the baby gurgle, which is a somewhat unusual notion, at least to me, and later on, Skylar says the baby gurgled. And we find this in many cases of proven false confessions. We see instances where the suspect has basically spat back information or ideas that were supplied by law enforcement.
You said that you're not a psychologist and you do not evaluate defendants to determine their particular susceptibility. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But are you familiar with the literature that tells us about the susceptibility of certain populations or types of people?
Yes, I am.
Can you summarize that for us, please?
There are certain populations.
Go ahead and answer.
Thank you, Your Honor. There are certain populations, young people are among them, people with mental illness are among them, that are particularly susceptible. They're overrepresented in the universe of false confessors. And there are certain individuals who are suggestible. That's what they're called. They can be evaluated for this. They're deemed particularly prone to be broken down.
By authority figures?
By authority figures, even if innocent.
You indicated earlier that you read Dr. Bassman's psychological evaluation of the defendant?
Yes, I did.
Was there anything you found significant in that?
I think you might want to rephrase your question, Mr. Richards.
approach for 1 second, Judge? Your Honor, based on what we discussed at the bench and the court's previous parameters, I'm finished with Professor Hirsch.
Okay, I'm going to circle back with my legal panel, criminal defense attorneys and former prosecutors, Brian Gaither and Holly Waltman. All right, Brian, tell me this. These two elements of what he calls the Reed theory, confrontation where law enforcement says, hey, we've got all the evidence we need against you. Basically, anything that you say contrary to you being guilty is pretty much pointless, right? That was the confrontation. Minimization is, hey, it isn't that bad. Just tell us the truth. Nothing will happen to you, and minimizing the potential consequences of their statements. So confrontation, minimization is what he said he saw in that second interrogation video, but to a whole nother level. Do you agree?
Well, the thing is, we're going to be honest about this. Situations like this are tough because we would never really know what the truth is. But when it comes to the psychology of it all, I can see where he's coming from, because the thing is, some people, it's like fight or flight. When they're saying that, no matter what you say, we have this, we don't, you don't know what they have. So, of course, in your mind, you're like, well, what do they have? And particularly if you have a particular person that's suggestive, like he said, they may want to fly away from it. They don't want to fight and say, I didn't do it. They may say, I want this to be over. So, yeah, I cremated the baby a little bit just to appease you so I can go home.
Okay, you talked about cremation. Okay, so in the interrogation video, the doc said that there were 2 instances where Skylar was repeating words that were fed to her, one being cremation, like you said, and the other being gurgle. Let's look at that interrogation portion of that interview where gurgle came up.